In February of 2020, there was a huge breakthrough in the PlayStation 3 community on PSX-Place.com, where this user discovered that an original backwards compatible model, CCHA00, that they bought from Japan, appeared to be serviced by Sony in 2012. As they were performing work on the system themselves and went to delid the RSX, they discovered a 40nm die. This is the smaller GPU found in PS3 Slim consoles, which are known to be much more reliable. Given the 90nm RSX is usually the leading issue for long-term reliability on these PS3 consoles, it was a huge discovery. Sony was providing a much better long-term fix for these precious PS3 models that had PS2 hardware capability. With this knowledge, the community got to work on trying to reverse engineer this process. The issue being that while the pin layout is the same between the 90, 65, and 40nm GPUs, the console will fail to boot without the correct GPU it's expecting. It's not a simple retrofit, so without knowing what Sony did, the community was stuck. However, unbeknownst to everyone, for years there's been a mod chip available out of Indonesia that allows an RSX swap. PSX-Place user Budakampong's brother made this mod chip, and it spoofs the RSX ID and allows the system to boot without issue. The mod chip has actually been around for so long, but never seemed to grab much attention and was often used to fix 90nm PS3 consoles in Indonesia. Unfortunately, Budakampong's brother Kia passed away, but Budakampong continued the production and selling the mod chip, the very thing that can give a breath of fresh air and new life to backwards compatible PS3 models, which at this point in time the community affectionately called these consoles Frankensteins. Then, 2 years after the initial discovery, February 2022, developer and PSX-Place user Major successfully replicated Sony's swap by plugging in the necessary command changes to the syscon and applying patches to the EEPROM right over a UART connection. In layman's terms, you can now trick the console to accept a new RSX without the mod chip. It's just a few lines of code applied over a UART connection and the console will boot with a new RSX. And ever since then, the art of repairing these consoles has been further studied and refined by hobbyists and shops. But it's still really fascinating to know that Sony themselves were doing this, and recently I had the opportunity to see one of these consoles firsthand, so I took a drive out to my friend Rob's video game store, Retro Rehome, to take a look at this console. Alright Rob, tell me about this PlayStation 3. I'm very excited for what you have right now.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, like, it was crazy. We were talking about this a while ago, and like, here it is. It's kind of funny how I got it. It actually belonged to one of my best friends. He had it for a while, and we were playing it at his house, and I was telling him one day, I was like, this thing's pretty loud, man. Probably needs some thermal paste, and he bought one of those, like, fake fans that, like, sits at the front of it. It was a help it, dude. And, you know, he wanted to do it himself. He's a smart guy. He was trying to figure it out, but, you know, he's busy like everyone else is, and he just decided, you know, it was too much for it after he took it apart, and he brought it to me in this lovely box here. And he's like, Rob, I'm never getting around to it. Yeah, this is yours now. So I bought it from him in pieces. And the other day, you know, I was getting ready to stock another one out here in the shop because, you know, I don't put out any PS3s that are not serviced. I don't trust them. I sat it down here to service it, and I was looking at it, and I was like, oh, wow. In Sharpie, it says 40nm on the board. I'm like, it can't be. We were just talking about this. There's no way. So, yeah, I deleted it, delidded it. And, yeah, sure enough, there's a 40nm die, and I was like, well, I know who I'm telling about this.
I was so excited, too, because it's like, we don't necessarily know how many of these are out there, because like the whole Frankenstein thing, which because of the 2020 discovery, which that's a whole rabbit hole, and there's a lot of topics regarding the RSX and the reliability of it, and what was the problem? Was it the NEC tokens? No, it's the BGA bomb, so it's the underfill. It's the NVIDIA rabbit hole of like, they were making a lot of faulty GPUs at the time. RIP-Felix did a really great video going over like a large portion of this stuff. But having said that, we still don't know like how many of these Sony ones are really out there, especially because these would have been consoles well past warranty. So you're paying for this when you send them to Sony around 2011, 2012. You did also say, right, that this had the warranty sticker.
It did.
So they put it back on
when my friend got it, he got it in a box. He said it was just like a weird Sony box, just like a plain brown one, had a Sony logo on it, but the foam inside like fit the PS3. It was specifically for a PS3. And I was like, dang, dude, like I wish you would have kept that. It'd been really interesting.
Here's the thing, when you told me that, that's where I was like, oh, it's definitely a Sony console, because I had a warranty request with Sony with my 60 gig in 2007. So I remember this box. I know what you're talking about. And I'm like, oh my God, so this console was serviced. To get more specific, it appears Sony would typically put a sticker on the motherboard to designate when they perform the swap. In other instances, they would write with Sharpie on the board. There's not many documented examples, and Rob says that he does recall taking the sticker off since it was a little bit from when he initially saw the board and didn't realize it was a Sony refurb. Also important to note, these consoles don't just have a new RSX swapped in, Sony also has to make voltage and resistor modifications, which are crucial in maintaining health for the new RSX and the power it generates. For example, there's resistor 2054, that actually has to be removed, and then resistor 2153 is moved into the new spot at a 45-degree angle after you scratch away and expose copper on the board. There's also the voltage change that replaces this MOSFET controller. This just further illustrates the complexity of this repair, and in a way demonstrates an internal willingness at Sony to address the issue head-on, instead of just sending consoles back with 90nm RSX chips. Though that might just come down to people willing to pay for repairs in 2011, and Sony not having new old stock 90s. Either way, paying for a repair back then was actually kind of a blessing in disguise.
I mean, service really well too. There's like not much flux around the chip or anything. It's very clean. Looks like they did a great job, like super professional. It's got the die spacer too. You got to make your own if you're going to do the Frankenstein.
That's the thing too, is it's an undertaking.
Oh yeah.
Part of the reason why I've like not talked about this topic or discussed it really at all is like I don't have the resources to do that. It requires a very expensive rework station, and it's skilled labor. Like it's not at all easy. So
I would consider myself like pretty decent tech as far as this stuff goes, and that's like still like stuff I'm learning how to do. I'm not at a point where I feel comfortable charging people to do it. I'm still like learning. Once I got it though, we're gonna do that.
That'll be fantastic too, because that's the great thing is like this was found out. And because it was reverse engineered by the community, like it's amazing. Like these consoles, as complex and a pain in the ass they are to maintain, it's like cool that they've got this booster shot that lets them live in this manner. Funny enough, I've actually seen, or at least heard too, that some of the Frankensteins that do happen, like an issue is you lose the PS2 playback, and the screen goes black on those games.
Really?
Yeah, I'm very curious to put this thing back together and figure out,
I know this one played PS2. I've played good. PS2 on it. I mean, it's fully tested. The person that had it would definitely have made sure of that. He would have not been happy. Otherwise, he's a very particular person.
This one is, and this one too, this is a COK002 board, so it's a CCHE model. So this particular console is the model where PS2 compatibility is a little bit reduced, where they start emulating the Emotion engine. So. And we've covered that before. You do lose some compatibility. Some games don't work all that great. You have some graphical artifacts, but weirdly enough, the consoles produce a slightly cleaner image on those PS2 games. But just one of those more nerdy particulars. This one is a COK002.
As a person who like really cares about fidelity, like that's almost like a selling point to me that it like looks a little bit better. I would give up some. I'm not gonna play like every single game, so you can't go wrong with either one.
Yeah, they're both great options. Assuming you're willing to be in the circumstance where, when the time comes, fortunately, these jobs aren't cheap if you try to find a place to do it or something. Like that's the other, I guess, school of thought here is that there's, because I've even put out videos about this, which is like the ultimate PS3 video I did. And it's like preventative maintenance. Really, the best thing you can do is the new thermal paste on top and underneath the heat shield. But like, we don't necessarily encourage changing out 90s if it's, well, in my opinion, I think if a 90 still works, use it till it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing, like, honestly, if you do any research, you know, there's a lot of myths too when it comes to this stuff, and a lot of misinformation. And really, honestly, if you keep it clean and cool, as far as like the CPU and stuff, as far as I know.
And that's the thing, right? Like, I've been down so many long nights where, like, and I'll admit this, because I've had people give me, you know, the business for, like, the ultimate PS3 video. You shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. But I admit, like, I'm more of a very casual hobbyist in this regard. I try to put out the right information, or at least what I understand it, but I will sit on PSX-Place, read all that stuff for hours, and just try to, you know, follow what the community is trying to figure out with this stuff. In fairness, like, yeah, a good school of thought is if you have a working 90, you don't necessarily have to go out of your way to start lifting it, and because we want to make sure these boards are properly maintained and have a strong life. We don't want to risk, you know, killing these boards too. And that's definitely a point to drive home. If your 90nm PS3 with backwards compatibility works, use it, enjoy it. It's still doing what it was sold to do. When the time comes, then consider a professional for the Frankenstein swap. With that said though, let's do some benchmarks. Alright, we got both consoles here. So real quick, this one is the 40nm Sony repair console put back together. This one, Rob, this is your personal console?
Yeah, check this out. It's not 20 gig, because, you know, under the hood we got all that goodness.
He did his shell swap, so he wanted the card reader, and he's still got the black trim on his.
I love that black trim.
But we do have some custom firmware going, so we can pull some temps and things like that. And we also want to get a baseline of, like, well, not a baseline, but rather just see some information about the consoles. And so your runtime on this personal machine, you said, has a boot count of 1600, shutdown count of 1500, and the runtime is 177 days. Is that new info to you?
That's a lot of days, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not too bad.
It's like half a year almost. That's wild.
Well, so here's the thing, though. Now, we don't know at all what this guy's going to show us.
I'm excited to find out.
Yeah, so let's get that going. Well, that would add up. So a boot count of 3,400, shutdown 3,400, runtime 301 days.
Dear Lord.
I mean, the context here, obviously, is that it's a Sony repair, so the console probably saw a lot of playtime originally, and then out of warranty, somebody paid to send it to Sony, then it got the 40nm installed.
Yeah, this dude probably would have beat the brakes off of me in Black Ops, for sure.
Let's get some temps going. We'll try the Last of Us here. That's always a very good benchmark as far as stress testing these consoles. You remember this intro? You know how to do this?
Oh no.
You know where you're going? Know where you're going?
No. It's been a long time, my dude.
Usually once you get in the car is where it starts ramping up. So I guess what's notable right away is we should acknowledge that we try to keep this as controlled as possible. So they're like on the stock fan curves. And your personal console, when's the last time you repasted that?
Probably about, I'd say like a year ago.
So it's got fresh thermal paste.
It does, yeah. What's as crazy is that the fan speed is like almost 10% less on the 40nm here.
Come on! There comes the car.
That was the controller, not me.
So just for comparison's sake, we also have a very beat up PS3 Slim, completely untouched on the inside.
Yeah, I didn't do nothing to it.
So dried thermal paste. And we'll check the playtime on this guy. 3,000 boot, 3,000 shutdown.
Let's see the errors.
Yeah, there's a lot of errors. Well, I mean, they all had errors. They're all going to spit out some codes. But this one's 354 days.
Ooh, lots of love. It's not even like in the web browser. It's screaming.
Yeah, it's idle at 33%, 68 Celsius.
Yeah, that's
on
like
just the XMB.
Yeah, that's not good.
So how much drywall do you think this console's been used to resurface?
Well, when Kyle brought it into the store... No, I'm just kidding.
Just making a save file and...
This is a good example of why, like, these things need preventative maintenance.
Fan curve going up to 50% already, and RSX is hitting 70 Celsius. These numbers aren't even necessarily bad. It's just that it also it needs a 63% fan speed. Just set off default curves to sort of attempt to keep it in check.
That's why you don't put them in cabinets or anything either. I mean, like, they need to breathe.
So another important element to consider is the ambient temperature, which Rob tells me he usually keeps his shop under 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which for this testing you can see the 90nm with relatively new thermal paste is operating at a completely reasonable temperature, just with the fan speed kicking in at a higher rate to compensate versus the 40nm, and that's essentially what we kept seeing in our testing. With that in mind though, there's still the general thought that it's not necessarily about the console being ice cold while playing, just that it's best to avoid these extreme high and low thermal cycles. But the good thing about these repairs isn't even strictly about the Frankenstein swap. Nowadays, you can pull error codes from the PS3 Syscon and find out exactly why a yellow light of death is occurring. And that's the most important takeaway that anybody should know. Yellow light of death is always considered a general hardware failure. So even if the RSX is known as a leading cause, there are other failure points like the tantalum capacitors. It's about proper troubleshooting before attempting a fix. But anyway, these official Sony repairs are fascinating, and without them, we may have never found a path to maintaining these precious consoles long term. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. You take it easy.